Well, Miss Tyra Banks has come under scrutiny and received a lot of backlash for her appearance in the Victoria's Secret show because she is now plus size. So let's talk about it. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Whitney Holcomb and I am author of the book 1 Year, 100 Pounds. For those of you who are new here, I lost 100 pounds on my own when I was 14 years old and I've kept it off for almost 20 years. I wrote a book about my experience being the bullied fat girl who changed her life through changing my mindset and changing my eating and exercise habits. And I wrote about all of that in my book, 1 Year, 100 Pounds, which you can find on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It is a tough love weight loss guide for girls and women, boys, whoever, who really want to change their life. It is, non-sugar coated advice. And if that works for you, then you should definitely check it out. And for those of you who do know, I am not part of the fat acceptance or health at every size movement because it's just not factually true coming from someone who used to be obese. That being said, I of course believe that everyone is worthy of love and respect regardless of their size. Again, I was someone who was discriminated against for being fat. So I know that fat discrimination is very real and it's never good, it's never kind, and it should not be excusable. And it's no secret that back in the early 2000s, late 90s, rhetoric like that was pretty rampant and it was pretty cruel and it was almost always targeted at women and women's bodies. I, for one, definitely remember looking at tabloids as a little girl and seeing literal supermodels and celebrities who were the epitome of, beauty ideals. And there would be paparazzi pictures of them at the beach or doing something, just out in the wild, I guess. And there would be like little red circles around the cellulite on their thighs. The caption being something like, "Oh, Heidi Klum gained some weight," or, looks like Sandra Bullock has a little bit of cellulite. I'm just making up the names of the people in the magazines. I don't know. It was all the different, artists and pop stars and movie stars of the time. But there was a lot of toxic stuff out there, right? Like they called a lot of people, women, fat who were actually not fat at the time. They were just a normal size. The standards were just kind of crazy. They were pretty cruel. And I for one am glad that we have come past that. I think, as I've said many times in many of my other videos, we've kind of overcorrected in the wrong way and gone towards, telling people that it's okay to be fat and it's healthy and it's not. But it's also not okay just to be a jerk to people for having a slightly different body size than a supermodel, which is why we have the subject of Tyra Banks and all the backlash she's gotten now. So I, for one, was always a fan of Tyra Banks. I loved her. I loved her when she first came out. Again, I think she's older than me. She's got to be in her 40s or 50s now. But in the 90s and 2000s, like she was really big. Like she was a supermodel. And I remember her more distinctly from Victoria's Secret. And also after that, she became like an actress. So she did the Life Size movie with, oh my God, what's her name? Lindsay Lohan, where she played the Barbie. Again, I loved that movie. I loved her. I just always thought she was so beautiful, and she was. And for those of you who are my age or older, like she was it back in the day. She was one of the it girls. She was a supermodel, and deservedly so. Like she was just stunning, and I always really liked her. I admired her, especially because she became more than just a model. I think she was one of the few models, who really had a personality that could cross over into other realms. Like she could act, she had a talk show, and she of course had America's Next Top Model, which I believe she created. I think that was her original idea. She was definitely very business minded. She was not just a one trick pony. And I thought that was really cool. And I definitely remember America's Next Top Model when it first came out. I was there to watch the first season, and it was a really popular show back in the day. It was something that was super new. It had never really been done before. And it really brought models or the modeling industry kind of to the forefront of popular culture, I think. I think, modeling was always kind of a big thing. And I think, we always looked up to models, and there was always an interest maybe in their life and their lifestyle. But America's Next Top Model kind of took it a step further, and it kind of made everyone want to be a model. Like we all wanted to be part of that scene. This show became popular right around the time that I actually was pursuing modeling. So again, I lost the weight when I was 14. And then through high school, that was when I had reached my goal weight and I started getting noticed as a model. I was kind of discovered around that time. I did some modeling contests and worked with different photographers. And so the show for me, watching that was really cool because at the time, like that was what I wanted to do. I really wanted to pursue a modeling career. So watching that show for me was like, okay, I'm learning different stuff. And you learned a lot of stuff from that show because they had real models on there like Tyra herself and all the other judges. And they really did, kind of teach you some of the tips and tricks of the trade. But of course, with that show and with any reality TV show, really, there was a lot of toxicity. Yes, they did say and do some things that were just kind of bizarre that really exaggerated some aspects of the modeling industry. For example, like some of the photo shoots they had the girls do, like, oh, you've got to be up in the air, hanging on this wire or standing on the side of this cliff, and they put them in really scary situations, actually dangerous situations, things that like in real modeling industry, like, you're probably really not even going to run into. But they, it had to be part of the show, right? There had to be the drama. And then of course comes the actual judging itself of the girls, which came down to everything from their posing to their style to their weight, which is the main topic that people criticize her for now is, talking about the girls' weight on the show. And I think I remember very vividly the one episode, I think her name was Robin, and she was not fat by any means. I think she might have literally been like a size 6 or 8. I think a size 6. I don't know. But she was very normal looking. She was very slim looking. But she wasn't this typical size 0 or size 2. And, I think the whole episode was basically about how like, oh God, how is she going to pull this off? Because she's a bigger girl. Oh, you gotta, Robin, you gotta learn how to pose because your tummy's showing too much, right? So the whole episode was kind of about how she was big and how that wasn't good, especially in the modeling industry. So that was one of the episodes I remember distinctly where, I can see the pushback from everyone now. And it was true. Like it was stupid to think that she was fat, and she wasn't. And I don't remember every single episode. I'm sure there were more episodes like that. I know that they also had Janice Dickinson on the show as a judge for a while, and she was kind of really out there. I liked her. I thought she was funny, but yeah, she definitely had that personality where she just said anything on her mind. And also keep in mind, she was even older than Tyra Banks. So she was coming from a different time period as well, where that stuff was probably a lot worse than it was even in the 2000s. So now that the Victoria's Secret fashion show came back this year in 2024, they had Tyra back. She closed the show. And she closed the show as a plus size model. She wore like this really kind of tight spandex thing. And, she strutted her stuff. She looked good, but as everyone wants to point out, she was plus size. She was big. And I have seen so many people talk about how, oh, isn't it ironic that, she made fun of those girls all those years, all the time. She terrorized the girls in the show. And now here she is, trying to strut herself as like a proud plus size woman, like, calling her out, basically saying that she's a hypocrite. She's all this stuff. So my response to this is, yes, it is ironic. Yes, she did do and say some questionable things back in the day, but at the same time, I have to defend her a little bit. And this is why. Number one, look, she was a product of her time. Okay, so you have to remember, she was a model back in like the 90s, 2000s, and she was a typical model. Like, she had to be very skinny. That was back when the industry was even more stringent than it is today. So she endured the same kind of treatment. I think she even did talk about how, she always had bigger thighs than a lot of the other girls in the modeling world. And that was something she had to deal with. She would get comments about it. So, it kind of makes sense that when she created this show, she is, only judging and speaking from her own experience and what she knew the modeling industry to be. And, it's not saying that this is an excuse ever to be mean to people. And just because that is the way it was back then, doesn't mean it was ever right. But again, you have to think about that was what she grew up in. That was what she knew. That was how she was judged. And that was how she felt at the time. And if you think about it, all of us loved that show, didn't we? We are the people who made that show popular. We at the time clearly didn't see anything wrong with it because we kept watching it. It's only now that, you know, we've grown and we look back at that and we cringe and we're like, ooh, like that was really okay back then. And so I wonder if she feels the same. Is it so crazy that maybe she has changed her tune? Maybe she has learned from her mistakes. Maybe she also looks back on it and cringes and is like, God, like, ugh, like what was I thinking? I don't know. Maybe she hasn't. Maybe she has already responded to this and apologized. I actually don't know. You know, maybe I should have looked at it myself. But if she hasn't, you know, maybe she should. I think that could be, you know, a good thing for her to do. That is my first argument in defense for her, I guess I would say, is that yes, again, she was a product of her time. She, in her mind and everyone's mind at the time, that was okay. Doesn't actually mean it was okay, but back then it was okay, if you know what I mean. The second thing I guess I want to say, and I will ask you guys, because I don't know. You know, I remember watching the show like the first few seasons when it was really big. I did not continue watching it afterwards. And like I said, I don't remember every single episode. I do know that they did a couple cycles with plus size models. But my question, I guess, for you guys, or anyone who knows the show a little bit better, is when people say that, like, oh my God, she terrorized models and girls, you know, for years on the show about being fat, specifically about being fat. I'm not saying about anything else. Did she actually? I mean, again, like I remember that one episode where with Robin, where all the judges were talking about it. So I remember that one specifically. But when they say that Tyra did, do they mean that she specifically, like in every episode, was like calling girls fat? Or do they mean that the other judges were, but they're saying, you know, they're putting it on Tyra because it was her show? You know what I mean? I guess what I'm saying is, are people overreacting a little bit when they say that she terrorized the women? Again, I don't remember. I did not keep up with the show, but was that like a big theme on every episode? Was she always calling girls fat? So that is the other thing I want to say. Like, was it specifically her? And yes, I guess even if it wasn't specifically her, just the fact that it was her show and she allowed it, I guess, yeah, you know, she should take some responsibility for that. I think also keep in mind that this was a reality show. All reality shows are toxic. All reality shows are scripted. They will say and do things to get a reaction out of anything, right? Because they want those ratings. So of course it was going to be over the top. So I think they said and did things specifically to get a rise out of people. And again, I'm not saying that it's right. It's still toxic, but I think, again, that was the intention behind it. And actually, fun fact, I was going to be on one of the cycles of America's Next Top Model. And I decided not to do it. So I actually went through the casting process and they chose me, and I ended up choosing not to do it. I actually did a whole video about it on my YouTube, but I deleted it because it was just really bad. It was one of my first videos when I was still learning how to do lighting and everything. Anyway, so I deleted it. Maybe I'll re-upload it again to kind of tell my experience. I never met Tyra. I did meet the casting agents. I had a good experience with them, but there was a specific reason why I chose not to do it. And anyways, if you guys want to hear about that story and want me to re-upload that video again with better lighting, then I will. Let me know in the comments below. But the other thing I have to point out about this show is that this show was about modeling. And if anyone knows anything about modeling, there is also the reality that not everyone can be a model. And I think this is pretty well known. Like, there has always been stricter guidelines for models than there is for regular people. So again, no, that girl Robin, the size 6'8" or whatever she was not fat by normal people standards, not whatsoever. But at the same time, especially again in Tyra's time, that was big for a model, right? You know, the regular model sizes were between like a size 0 to 4. So again, we're talking about a show that is trying to make these girls into supermodels. Look, that is one aspect of the industry. That is one reality of the industry, is that you have to be a certain size. You have to look a certain way. So I did some modeling. Like I said, right around that time when I was chosen to be on America's Next Top Model, I was like 19 or 20. So that must have been like 2019, 2010. I don't know what cycle I would have been on. Maybe it was that cycle where they did, actually it might've been, because yeah, so I'm only 5'8", and I remember for a while they, were only taking girls like 5'9" and up. Cause again, that's another very strict, thing you have to be a model was you had to be super tall. And there was one cycle that they did where they were like, and they had like Marissa Miller come on. Do you guys remember her? She was Victoria's Secret model for a while, but she was only 5'8". And they had her come on because this was like the cycle where they were allowing girls like 5'7" and up to be on the show. So maybe it was one of those cycles that I would have been on. But anyhow, like I said, I didn't do the show. Around that time, I was still really thin. I was like, like I was like 120, 125, something like that. But like I said before in other videos, actually around the time I moved to New York, I had gained weight. I'd gotten up to like a size 6'8". And actually most of my time in, doing modeling and in New York City, at least, I was a size 6 to 8. And I remember going to agencies and going to castings, and I had a hard time. I had a hard time getting signed, a hard time getting work. It really was kind of, I think, what stalled like my modeling career, just the fact that I had gained weight around that time and I wasn't able to lose it during that time. I did do another video on this as well, if you guys want to check that out. I kind of talk about that whole experience. But again, basically, I was what was considered like mid-size in the modeling industry. The thing is, back then at least, there was no industry for mid-size girls, for size like 6, 8, 10. There was no industry. It was only straight size models and plus size. So I remember going to agencies and castings and them being like, you know what, we really like your look, you're beautiful, but if you want to model with us, you need to either lose weight, get down to like, a straight size, which is 0 to 4, or you need to gain weight and be a plus size model, which starts at size 12. So that was the experience I had time and time again. Again, I was fortunate that I never experienced like nastiness in the industry I know other girls have talked about. I know everyone has a different experience, but that was just mine. As far as like, it was rejection, but it wasn't like, they were never like, oh my God, you fat pig, how dare you even show up to this casting? Who do you think you are? I never experienced that. It was not like a devil wears Prada kind of thing. It was more just like, oh, look, yeah, we like your look, but this is just the reality, like you can't fit the clothes. If you want to do this, then you can either lose weight or you can gain weight. And, again, any kind of rejection hurts, but I understood it, it just was the business. And I just kind of took it as like, it's a professional thing. It is what it is. You don't have to be a model, right? And I kind of realized that too. Like, well, I don't have to do this. Like, it's not like the only thing, it can do with my life. But yeah, I don't think of that as like them being mean or being unfair. It just kind of was what it was at the time. Even though I do think it's interesting because I've said this before too, like, okay, we have this problem in America of like, two extremes, like either like we expect everyone to be like super, super skinny and perfect, or we have people who are obese. And it's kind of like, okay, kind of seems like the solution to that would be, let's, try to push the normal healthy body, right? But whatever. So I think that is the thing about America's Next Top Model too, was that it was meant to be a modeling show. And I know it gets kind of tricky because now you have this TV show that is kind of exposing, I guess, what people call the toxic parts of the industry. And now you're having other young girls watch this and now they think that they need to be this way. So yeah, I can see how that could be a little bit problematic. I think, again, going back to Victoria's Secret and how they had been villainized, recently for spreading toxic, body image issues. The thing is, look, I don't know. It's hard, right? Because I understand how you have impressionable young girls who see this stuff and think that's the way they need to be. But the thing is, there's two realities. There is the modeling industry and then there is real life. So even when I was in that kind of sphere, I knew that like, okay, in the modeling industry, a size 6 or 8, I was huge, but I knew in real life, I was not. I knew in real life, I was just pretty normal. And honestly, yeah, I guess it's probably easier said than done, but if you are not trying to be a model, if that is not the career choice you are going for, then you don't need to pay attention to the standards of models or the beauty industry, because that's not you, right? Like, I think it is. Maybe it's not so apparent when you're younger. I guess that's different. Definitely when you're older, you kind of realize like, yeah, that's not the real world. Like that's their world. That's fine. In the real world, people don't care so much whether you're a size 2 versus a size 6. And I think just the fact that, look, you can't be a model because you don't fit those certain standards, it doesn't mean that you're not beautiful. It doesn't mean that you're not attractive. For example, like there are plenty of celebrities like beautiful actresses and singers and artists who would never make it as a model. And I don't mean because they're not pretty. I mean because they don't have the right look. Like, to have a model, you have to have the right look, the right bone structure. You have to, be a certain size, be a certain height. And there are plenty of celebrities and pop artists who don't fit those criteria, but they're still seen as sex symbols because they are. They're still gorgeous. So again, I think, America's Next Top Model, it was not for everyone. It was meant to discover America's Next Top Model. I don't know that it ever actually really did. And again, I don't think that was ever really their intention. I think their intention was just to make money. So does Tyra deserve all the backlash she is getting now? Again, I don't know. Maybe yes and no. Like I said, just because it was something that was always done, just because it was, that time period, doesn't necessarily mean it's right. At the same time, again, she was a product of that time. We all were, okay, if you were my age. Again, all of us were watching that show. All of us were, putting the ratings up. It's only now that we're all changing our tune because we learned and we grew, and that's fine, right? And I'm sure maybe she has too. Maybe she has or hasn't. Maybe, if she hasn't, then like I said, she should apologize. Especially since now, yeah, she is a bigger woman. And I'm sure, look, karma has a way of coming for everyone, right? So I think she got hers. Like, now she's getting it. She's getting the backlash that she's supposedly served up to other people. But again, it's not like this is her first time getting backlash. It's not like this is the first time anyone's critiqued her body, because again, remember, she was a model back in the 90s, 2000s, and she was being critiqued all the time. Every model was. And I think it's kind of interesting because this kind of seems similar. It's kind of parallel to what is happening with Lizzo, except with Lizzo, it is the opposite way around. So right now, Lizzo is on her skinny girl journey. She is losing weight and she's looking amazing and she looks healthy, but she is getting tons of backlash at the same time for that because she was part of the fat acceptance movement. She was part of the love your body at every size. She was a proud fat girl until she wasn't. And what was her reason behind losing weight? I mean, who knows? I'm sure she would probably tell you it was health reasons. And it probably was, because she was morbidly obese. Again, there's only so long you're going to live when you are morbidly obese. But also, look, she is successful now. She's got money. She's got time. She's in the public eye. I'm sure that definitely played a part in her trying to lose weight and finally being able to lose the weight. Because like I've said so many times, I really don't think there are that many people who are truly happy being overweight or being obese, because it's just not your body's natural state of being. It is not a healthy state of being. But yeah, so many people, especially people, her own fans, are criticizing her for that, for doing something good for herself. But again, just like with Tyra, I think with Lizzo, is she not allowed to change her mind? Okay, yes. And again, she was a product of her time too, because she fell into the trap of the toxic body positivity and the toxic fat acceptance. But it looks like she's realizing now that that probably was not the best route to go. And so she's changing, and good for her. So again, maybe the same can be said about Tyra. Again, I don't know. I have not followed her too much really since the 2000s. So I don't know much about her stance on body positivity or her stance on anything in general. I still remember her from the 2000s when I really liked her. Again, I thought she was beautiful. I thought she was really talented. But if you guys have any thoughts, let me know in the comments below. I would be interested to hear, because again, I'm really not trying to defend bullying or anyone being mean. I'm just trying to look at it from a different viewpoint. And again, I think that there really is something to be said about people being products of their time, which is definitely the case in Tyra's situation. Yeah, I mean, if you are a millennial, if you're my age, we all know what it was like back then. Anyhow, guys, that's all I have for you today. If you liked this episode of the 1 Year 100 Pounds podcast, then please like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel or my podcast so you can hear more content like this, and I will see you next time.